Hi, I'm Janelle Benjamin, and welcome to White and Woke at Work. It's my first episode in a series, and I'm happy to be here today with Maja Sandstrom to discuss her journey from being racist, slightly realizing she was racist, to becoming actively anti-racist, and share some of her personal stories and her journey to doing so. So welcome, Maja.
Hi, Janelle.
I'm pleased to have you here with me today. And I want to just, get right into it. Maja is a progressive activist and a tech recruiter from Chicago. And she and I met on LinkedIn, where she shares a little bit about herself, and her tagline kind of drew me in. She notes that she's a champion of equity and actively using her white privilege to combat anti-racism. And I thought that was fantastic. So welcome, Maja. I'm happy to have you here.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me, Janelle. It's really an honor to be with you here.
Thank you. So tell me a little bit about yourself, Maja, I guess, and your upbringing and how you came to realize that you were, in fact, a racist.
Well, so I guess I'll start with where I was born and raised. So I'm originally from a really small town in Michigan, the Upper Peninsula. It's called Marquette.
Yeah.
People might know it because you might see it on the Weather Channel every now and again. Honestly, if you ever have a chance to visit, if you get up that way, it's gorgeous. It's beautiful. It's one of the most pristine places in the U.S. to be, but it's also very racially homogenous.
I went to law school in Lansing. So where is it in relation to Lansing?
So Lansing is very far south in the Lower Peninsula.
Yeah.
We are several hundred miles away up through Lake Traverse City, across the bridge, and then I am a little bit out further west in Marquette. So the very, very top of the United States. If you were to cross Lake Superior, we would be in Canada.
Wow. So you're at the tippy top of the glove.
Almost the tippy top. So yeah, I was born and raised in Marquette, had a really, like I said, a racially homogenous upbringing. Most of the people that, I went to school with and interacted with were white. Every now and again, we are from a place that has a large population of Native Americans, but beyond that, there's just not a whole lot of Black and brown people where I'm coming from. So honestly, I guess just in general, I grew up in kind of a small family. It's just my parents and my brother. He's about 2 years older than I. I'm 36 now.
Yeah.
And yeah, so growing up,
was your family like you? Were they liberal minded, or were they?
I've been thinking a lot about this lately, and I will say, yes, my family on the whole was very liberal minded, progressive to an extent.
Yep.
So like all in all, I think the reason that I was able to A, recognize my racism, and B, kind of start to own it, was I wasn't like raised in a family that was actively saying bad things about Black people or brown people.
Yeah.
We weren't necessarily championing the equity for people, but I wasn't raised in a very religious household. I wasn't raised in a bigoted household. We were really raised in values of owning your own power,
Yes.
being responsible for yourself, and thinking for yourself. So just having that background and freedom of thought, kind of without religious, I guess, structurally religious requirements, especially as a woman.
Yeah.
I was just able to explore entertainment and literature. I think that a lot of other kids just really weren't allowed to.
Yeah.
I remember being 10 reading Langston Hughes.
Wow.
I don't know a lot of other white kids in rural America who were even exposed to that, or like, I guess, allowed.
Were they working class family or upper class? Like, what was just?
We're definitely working class.
Yeah.
Part of the reason I became a progressive activist was, my parents have worked at the same company for over 30 years.
Yeah.
I don't think they've received a honest to goodness actual raise for their loyalty and longevity for the past 15 or 20 of those years.
Wow.
So, yeah, I watched them, work really hard and do that American dream thing where, you come from basically nothing. Both my parents were, I guess, second generation, immigrants here.
Uh, you've So Maja, tell me a little bit more about then, the things that your family might have believed or imparted to you about other groups, right? Did you have conversations about people of color in the United States, the Mexican community? What were their viewpoints that they might have imparted to you?
Yeah, so unfortunately, I can't remember any specific conversations that I had with my family. I think it was mostly, I should say, specific conversations as a child. I can't really remember pointed conversations. I think it was the lack of kind of being inundated with racially biased language. Like looking back, I don't recall anyone in my family being outwardly racist,
Okay.
right? So I do know, I can own my racism, and I don't want to speak for the rest of my family, but we're all white people who were raised in America. So there is a baseline racism that we don't even know about just because of the media that we ingest and the entertainment that is kind of just like out and available for us.
Yeah.
So you really have to seek to find Black voices, especially when you're, in a rural kind of American community.
So let's go
So
there. Like, what made you, I guess, start to seek out those voices and, you know, kind of
I,
find your place in this activism and
yeah,
waking up
waking
the realities?
that is a great question. I think, as I've been thinking about it really honestly in the last few months, I think, I was a really smart kid from a not very, well off.
Okay.
All right. So yeah, I think, being a kid from not a very like economically well-off family. I didn't have the latest clothes. I didn't have a whole lot of, I guess, like economic capital, right? So when you're
So then tell me, you grew up in this family, they seem quite, liberal, open-minded, but they're not really discussing issues of race or racism or racialized people. How is it
yeah.
then that you went from, living in this kind of closed community, to kind of opening yourself up to the realities of people of color?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think a lot of my beginning of my journey was to do with like the kind of entertainment and the literature that I was reading. Once I started becoming really woke about uh, current news and the events that were going on in the day, I would say about 15 years ago, I started actually consuming the news, becoming educated on the government and our systems. By default, if you're paying attention and you're reading, Black voices in literature, it all kind of starts to make sense.
Yeah.
And you get a better understanding of the actual plight of Black and brown people because of the way that the system has been set up to benefit me and to harm BIPOC.
Yeah.
So I don't really know exactly where it started. I think just becoming more aware of the society around me, the way that the government was set up.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I started watching Rachel Maddow, I think, at the beginning of my, I guess, education on government and becoming an actual progressive activist.
Mm-hmm.
I was just liberal from the start.
Yeah.
I didn't understand why some people would want to treat me differently than they would want to treat others. I really, I guess I just had a basic idea that everyone should be treated similarly. And maybe that was what my family kind of always instilled, right? Is that you don't treat the garbage man any different than you treat the president of the company that you work for.
Right.
Everyone deserves to be treated similarly and with the same respect.
Yeah. And so I guess was it through any type of religious upbringing that you might have had as well, or religious teaching, or was it just totally secular? Oh, I've lost you again. I've lost you again. Pause. So thank you for sharing a little bit more about your family and the things that they taught you. I think it makes sense, that fundamentally everybody should be treated the same, and that type of teaching was useful in your life. But did it come from any type of Christian or religious teaching?
Yeah, so my father, he was raised in a really Catholic, they went to Catholic school. They were, going at least twice a week. My mother was raised in a very stringent apostolic Lutheran upbringing, which kind of pushed her away from religion and going to church. And my father kind of, stopped going after high school, but they both did have a really strong, I guess, like message to me and my brother as we were growing up that, you don't treat anybody any differently, even though they didn't. I went to church a few times. I've gone, and maybe that's the thing too. I've been to a Lutheran church. I've been to a Catholic church. I haven't had the opportunity yet to go to like a Baptist church or anything, but I would totally love that. I'm a secular person by nature. I guess I identify as an agnostic.
Yeah.
So nothing was really like rooted in any sort of particular religious upbringing, but they're all informed. It's all informed by religious upbringing.
For sure. For sure. So you take me then to, I guess, you're waking up to the realities and the things that are taking place in racialized communities and Black people in particular in the United States. And was there like a turning point or a critical situation that occurred that was just like your aha moment?
So I think specifically right now, that aha moment was George Floyd.
Yeah.
Previous to that, I've had the pleasure of volunteering with MoveOn.org for, gosh, I've been a member for.
Oh.
Right. So I've been a member of MoveOn.org for about 20 years. They are a progressive organization that really champions creating a world that is equitable for everyone, an America where everyone can thrive. So my main capacity with MoveOn as a volunteer is to help folks on the ground who want to change their communities take that first step, figure out how to organize, how to host actions, how to host protests, and then through that work, I was obviously exposed to so many other volunteers and members of MoveOn, which is a incredibly diverse community. And then I had the pleasure of being introduced to not one, but two diversity trainings. One was for our group as a whole, and then another was specifically focused on white women, really learning to accept and own their complicity in white supremacy. So that was a couple of years ago. I was introduced to the true story of Emmett Till. I knew a little bit about it, but I didn't know the full story. I didn't know the full story about the woman who accused him, and you know, her place as a female white woman in the South at that time.
Right.
And I think then that was really the start of me like, I always knew that white people were for the most part racist. I always knew that Black people were not being treated the same as others in America. That's not necessarily a starting point that everyone who goes to these trainings has.
Right.
But I was able to, I think, because of that baseline understanding, take in a lot of the information that a lot of white people just kind of think is someone pointing blame at them. So with that understanding and with that training and everything, George Floyd happened, and I said to myself, I have this knowledge, I have this baseline understanding, and I'm actively being racist by not using this and not voicing my knowledge. That was the turning point. George Floyd really was the turning point for me to say, I have this power,
Yes.
I have this network, I have this voice, I have to use it. It is an imperative at this point.
So let's delve a little bit deeper into that, Maja, because I think it'll be really interesting for those listening to know and understand precisely what it takes to wake up to these realities, right? I understand, you said a lot throughout the conversation where I did not know, and then you knew, you did something to learn or to inform yourself. And then why is it that you're able, I guess, then to not reject what you're hearing? Why is it that you're not resisting or pushing back and saying, well, I'm not racist, right? Those are the types of things that we hear in the Black community, quite frankly, to make us feel as if, what we're saying isn't valid, we're being gaslit, right? For feeling, the way that we do about our experiences. So what makes you different?
Oh gosh, I think that's a loaded question. I'm not right. I'm not sure. I'm not sure where to start. I think a lot of it has to do with not being withheld or not holding myself back from seeking out and ingesting Black entertainment, Black literature, Black voices online. How I got there, I'll think about it some more, and hopefully we can chat about it and get into the nitty-gritty and the details. But I think just being a person who wasn't forced to think in some sort of box really opened me up and allowed me to accept the truth that other people were delivering. And I think simply being a woman and dealing with sexism, I remember the first time a man said something untoward to me, I was like 10 years old, and I had like a really strong reaction to, I was 10 years old, I was in a mall, and some guy said he would like to put a dime in my ear. I didn't know what that meant. I had no clue at all. And I just knew it made me feel uncomfortable. And so I think like just that kind of that recognition of being treated as different or other, or being people thinking that they have some sort of power over you or some sort of I guess just like allowance to treat you in a certain way. I was very aware of that very, very young. So I guess I was a feminist first. And that just created the groundwork for becoming an anti-racist.
Yes.
Yeah.
So that's really, really telling. It speaks a lot to, what white people, in fact, need to do in order to become anti-racist like yourself, right? To have that awakening. And so, tell me a little bit about how you're using, your anti-racism activism in your sphere of influence at work, and the things that you're experiencing and doing while you're there.
Absolutely. So I think initially I didn't realize kind of the support that I was providing the BIPOC professionals within my organization.
Mm-hmm.
We work obviously, so I'm in technology recruiting and staffing predominantly.
Mm-hmm.
Oftentimes in that work, we work with lots of Indian professionals, and we also have a staff that supports us who are based out of India. So, really, the way that I approached my job in supporting them would be how I would approach it in supporting anyone. But what I like to do is anytime I have an opportunity to provide some sort of knowledge or learning, I'm going to help whomever is around me, whether they be above me or below me in the hierarchy of our professional life. So I guess in my capacity, I'm, helping my Indian counterparts when they have questions about American culture. I try to edify them, and then in turn, I try to, allow them to edify me. What I think I try to do in general, and something that I started to do when I, was recruiting, understanding that Black and Brown BIPOC professionals are, I can't even remember the statistics right now, but if you put a name like Shaniqua on a resume, right?
Yep.
She is not gonna get called back as much as a person named Hannah.
Right.
And I guess having a name like Maja, it's also like when someone can't see my face, unfortunately, they may disregard me because they think I'm a Black, Brown, or POC person.
Right.
And, I think in general, when I first started recruiting, I wasn't doing that, I was looking at someone's technical ability. I wasn't saying, well, I'm going to disregard you because I don't think this client is going to consider you because of your name.
Right.
Which is, super unfortunate that probably a lot of my candidates that I presented were not considered because of that. But I just saw no reason to disregard someone because of the type of the name that they had. And I was also, I would be hamstringing myself in not providing my clients with all of the resources that I could potentially be providing them. So I guess initially I didn't even realize I was being anti-racist in doing that. But the more I read, the more I understand HR, and the more we hear about the kind of just initial discrimination when someone's reviewing a resume, that is definitely one of the first things that I didn't realize that I was doing in helping BIPOC. That's definitely something that I started doing when I was recruiting, and obviously have continued to do to today.
So you're actively now including those names that might have necessarily been excluded because.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And I know that not every recruiter is doing that.
Right.
And then, beyond that, in my, I learned really, really early on, speaking with specifically Black women in security,
Mm-hmm.
I always found that they had the sweetest dispositions. They were always so very kind and so very thankful, and had just a tone to their voice that was just the very, very sweetest. And the more I heard that, the more I started questioning it. Like, and I've read about it too. There is this phenomenon, right, that Black women specifically have to put on airs of being really kind and really sweet,
Mm-hmm.
and not combative and not confrontational. And I was literally hearing that almost every single time I spoke with a candidate. And, just thinking about that and thinking about the power and the privilege that I get to have just by being a white woman and being able to be angry, or being able to be, I guess, like myself, and the constant performance that has to be put on by Black, brown professionals that we don't even really have to think about. Yeah, everyone has to put on a face for their job or whatever, but there's so many additional levels of performance that we expect, you know, from women, but also from Black professionals. And it was definitely something that I experienced firsthand. And then I started reading about it, and the phenomenon, it wasn't a phenomenon. This is how it is, and how, you know, Black women have had to adapt to survive and thrive in the professional world. So ultimately, I would like Black women to be able to speak how they want and get angry and not just be labeled that angry Black woman. Right. It's another champion of equity that I would love to see, and I'll support and champion for sure.
I'm hoping that through this conversation that everyone gets as woke as you. I would be remiss, Maja, if we did not speak a little bit about the sign behind you and the death of Miss Breonna Taylor. Oh, rest in power. Thank you for showing the entire sign. Yeah, you know, rest in power, Maja, to Breonna. I do want to acknowledge her death, and I guess allow you to say a few words, if you would, about, you know, your sign, your need to create it, and what you'd like to say about it today.
Yeah, you know, the verdict that came out yesterday was not unexpected, especially for the Black community, because this is what happens almost every time a Black person is murdered by the hands of police officers in the United States. The justifications are, in my mind, absolutely not justified. I mean, when a police officer is charged for endangering other people and not charged for murdering someone, that just shows that we don't care about Black women in this country. Breonna was a force for good. She was using her power and position to help others. And I think ultimately we all need to take our power and our position and our voices to create and affect change. Because she's one of hundreds of names already this year. I think we've had maybe 12 days this year where someone, you know, hasn't been shot by a police officer in the United States. There's certain countries where police officers haven't shot anyone in over 20 years. We need to work. We need to get to work, and we need to honor Breonna. And rest in power.
Oh, I've got goosebumps. Thank you so much for honoring her today on my first episode of the series. I really, really appreciate you and value your contribution today and the conversation that you've given us. I hope that, you know, all of the listeners will connect with you. They can reach you at Lady Liberally on both Twitter and on Instagram to learn a little bit more about you and your activism. And hopefully you've inspired others to also use their privilege and power to affect change in their spheres of influence. So I want to thank you today for coming on, Maja. And if you'd like to get in touch with me, you can reach me at allthingsequitable at .ca. And I'm also Janelle Benjamin on LinkedIn. So again, thank you for coming. And I look forward to doing this again and again. Take care, and I will join all of you again. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Janelle.
Thank you.